Welcome to Breathtakingly Imperfect, a podcast dedicated to exploring the human experience and sharing of heart-earned wisdom, all to help you live with love, presence, and freedom. I offer insights from my own journey of healing, finding peace, and personal growth in hopes of inspiring you to find meaning, fulfillment, and a true love for life. I'm your host, Yesenia. Let's walk this breathtakingly and imperfectly beautiful journey I call life. I believe words, especially the way that we receive them now in podcasts, are an art. It's what I choose to use and connect the subjects I feel can help us find and develop our ability to live with an unshakable sense of peace. Here, you'll find words that aim to connect deeply and are filled with freedom. I don't seek to be right or wrong, but rather give my passions and perspectives openly and genuinely to anyone who is ready. So let's get started. The purpose of today's episode is to share what I've learned from my journey of emotional release, how embracing it provided growth I now know as self-love, and how emotional acknowledgement created freedom in the form of presence. Emotional release. It's a part of the journey, at least for me it was. And in episode 2, I talked about an overview look at what the beginning stages of being on a journey were like for me. I did a ton of healing work, and along the way, I really did pick up on several skills like curiosity, compassion, and forgiveness that would keep my journey moving along. And I like to think of these as what laid the groundwork towards growth. But as much as I had placed acknowledgement and reflection to these experiences, I'd missed a critical step, the emotion of them. And trying to be able to share and put into words what that experience was like was a challenge. It's the same reason I like to paint pictures with other images, like the one of a garden. There was a complexity in the midst of being curious, compassionate, and forgiving. It wasn't simple. And to paint a better picture of what that felt like, I will describe it as this. Okay, so it's like I decide to start working on my garden one day. And because I'm ambitious by nature, I go for the biggest weed first. And then I pull it out and it's in my hands. I see it for the first time in a long time. And I just can't believe that this has been growing in my garden. It's neglected and uncared for. And it's like, why did I leave this here for so long? And then once it's out, I realize that there's this emptiness where it was once growing. And now that it's out, what do I do with what was once there? For me, digging up what I'd buried brought up several sets of emotions. The initial ones are the ones I used as a cover. Most of mine were anger. And the void I'm describing is left after you've dug out your weeds is what I masked. In more instances than not, it was just really deep-rooted pain. But I slowly learned that that hole is something best left to be observed, to be felt, however it comes up. And well, I dealt with it as best as I could. As a natural suppressor of emotions, the weeds in my garden harbored the emotion that I couldn't feel at the time in its entirety. I was processing, taking in the experience with a new point of view. I'm sure we've all heard someone say, don't cry, don't be angry, don't be sad, as an attempt to shift away from the complexity of an emotion, both for the one that's verbalizing it, as an attempt to keep us from feeling what's unpleasant. Lindsay C. Gibson, author of Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents, says some parents use platitudes or meaningless statements because they oversimplify complex situations and make them easier to deal with. It's in our natural instinct not to want anyone to feel these emotions because they're painful, but not giving those feelings the time of day actually does more harm to us in the long run than in the moment they are felt. And avoiding the emotion could just be us not having an experience feeling it out. Knowing this has really helped me become aware of the situations I find myself wanting to say, don't, as the very things I really need to work on developing next. Where there is a don't feel this way, there's an opportunity for more. Bessel van der Kolk, author of one of my favorite books, The Body Keeps a Score, discusses a study about the correlation between rheumatoid arthritis and autoimmune disease with no cure and only dampened by medication, and that of trauma. What they caught early on is that the people participating in this study weren't able to or have difficulty recognizing or describing their own emotions. It's a trait shared by some of us and our upbringing as children who realized being on someone's good side meant keeping these emotions to ourselves. And in doing so, we found safety. And just like with an autoimmune disease, the possibility of it stored in our body as a toxin with nowhere to go is exactly what we're doing by harboring these emotions. Just think about how you feel holding in painful things versus the way that you feel once you get it off and out of your body and your chest. In my case, learning about emotional acknowledgement and the release of it placed puzzle pieces together I would not have otherwise found. When my parents' separation took place, there were absolutely emotions present. But because my environment was not in line with how I felt, and I didn't have anyone to help me work through it, there was no safety. So I suppressed the sadness I had actually felt and put up a front that at the time felt like bravery and understanding at the time. I was only 9. Fast forward the discovery of said trauma and reaching out to my dad. And then several years after that, one day, I just woke up crying. I'd dreamt my dad told me I didn't have to be brave anymore. And it just set something in me that just felt deeply painful and releasing at the same time. I thought I had actually processed my dad's departure, like I had already reached out, wrote a letter, and all this stuff. But those words brought a deeper pain. I had failed to acknowledge in the process of pulling that weed. And it was something that I had carried with me for so long. So I just allowed myself to sob that whole day. And in the midst of my release, I actually found and felt awe of myself for my body's ability to remember what I couldn't bring myself to feel at the time. So I just let it all out. What I couldn't as a 9-year-old, this little version of me that I had tucked away. And even though that entire day was emotionally draining, it was necessary. This is how I decided I would fill those holes left by the weeds I was pulling out. I'd just feel them out when they were ready. The emotional part is what allowed for the void to be filled with a new seed to finally be able to grow. Emotions aren't linear, and healing isn't either. I guess I mistook the journey of working through my weeds as something that would gradually progress in a straight line. At least in hindsight, I didn't feel that I had taken any steps back. And it was the same reason I felt so surprised when I first did experience an emotional release. After having thought that I dealt with my daddy issues, I was really taken back by this emotional epiphany that just seemed to come out randomly one day. I remember thinking to myself, why am I crying? Why do I feel like this? But I let it be. I was genuinely curious. At one point, I even thought that my dad could have died and I was receiving his departing transmission. But in all seriousness, the experience of releasing my long, stored pain brought with it a new perspective in the same way that life is so expansive and anything but simple. So then are the situations we deal with and the way that they affect us in more ways than we can understand. What I got was the understanding that what I had experienced was not a step backwards in my healing. It was me setting up these weeds in my garden for growth, for transformation. I had done myself a service by bringing them up to the surface, but they would flourish at their own pace and not mine. When the pain finally surfaced, it was because I had what I needed to grow. As I'm able to reflect now on if this would have came up sooner for me, I would not have been able to deal with it like I did. And that was with a ton of grace, which did not exist before I began working in my garden. I saw my healing journey as a path, one which I had decided would only move forward for me. This was just how I placed an optimistic view on the difficult things that I'd encounter on the way. But I realized that life isn't trauma 1 checked off and then trauma 2 checked off. Instead, I learned to see my journey more and more as a garden, one with no boundaries, no linear paths, all mine to expand in ways I can still cultivate with the best possible intention, but is ultimately free to grow. Emotional woes. What can I say? Emotions are not always easy to handle, especially for those of us that weren't shown that specific skill set. It's why I think it's important to share with you how nurturing some of these tougher emotions with just a little bit of gentleness and love helped me honor experiencing the pain that was making its way out of the places I'd hid it in. It was reading The Body Keeps a Score that I learned, and I quote, "As long as the trauma is not resolved, the stress hormone that the body secretes to protect itself keep circulating, and the defensive movements and emotional responses keep getting replayed, meaning we are literally and unknowingly reliving our trauma so long as it remains unaddressed. It's why the emotions we didn't have at the time of our distress spills over into our actions. The emotional release I'd felt from this dream I had about my dad felt like grief. It was followed by an emotional response by my body. I was completely drained for the entire day. It was like emptying out the emotional response I didn't have the space to have when I was 9. Taking in and allowing myself to feel stored emotions brought about some darkness. And if I'm being honest without wanting to discourage anyone from their own, it tends to seep out every time I bring forward old wounds. I do have a way that's been so helpful, especially as I work myself out of these tough spots. Just like I would with the literal dark, all I do is shine some light on it. I'm talking literally and figuratively. This includes what I watch as being light and funny or wholesome, to getting some actual light by being outside in the sun, to nourishing my body with some light, to lighting a candle and giving myself a lighter day than usual. I've been stuck before with emotions. Some just take longer to nourish than others, but it has been the part where I let myself feel them out that has allowed me to move on. For example, I've had two big emotional releasing moments to date, but I'll talk about one. In the first one, I've told you guys what happened with my dad and how I cried all day long. I allowed myself to openly sob, and it helped that I had the house to myself when I did. But after a while, I decided I would try to go just about my day. So I went to the gym like normal, except I was there and I couldn't mentally focus on anything. I was physically there, but my mind wasn't. And it didn't help that I was teary eyed the entire time. I was a complete mess. Actual light is an energy form. It's literally what keeps our planet alive. Gary Zukav talks about how our intentions shape and set in motion the light in our lives. In my case, my intentions were to nurture and honor the darkness I felt. I was going through something very real to me, and I understood that. Choosing how to go about my day next would be the motion set forth by the light. My intentions were shaped out of love for myself and what I needed that day, not what I wanted. Because I'll tell you, I wanted to include not dealing with what I was dealing with for the remainder of the day. And what I needed was to give this 9-year-old version of myself the safety, comfort, and space to just be with her emotions. So I took my attempted gym visit as a loss and left home to have a day to be gentle to myself. I skipped cooking dinner and ordered takeout for my family, something that was felt like a weekday cheat day for my kids and a nice hearty meal for my husband and me. I skipped the routine cleaning of my house and I spent it cozied up on my couch. I watched some uplifting movies and, of course, had some major cuddle time when my husband finally came home. Had I chosen to remain unprocessed of these emotions or too afraid to face them because they felt like too much, I would have just steamrolled throughout that whole day because that's what I was used to. But then what? I'll tell you, because I experienced my own change of pace. As dreadful as the day had been, the next morning felt brand new. I'd be lying if I told you I was not worried when I went to sleep that night. I was very skeptic about not feeling the way I felt again in the morning. But when I opened my eyes, I felt refreshed and amazed at what I had just relived. I was genuinely recharged and stronger from the whole thing. And on days in which I have felt the intensity of my heavier emotions, I've learned to give myself the day to do whatever I have to do to work through and not against what I'm feeling. And each time has been different. I don't know that these emotional releases mean I am completely resolved. But what I do know is that when I could be dwelling in my mental funk, I choose to set light in motion to guide me through. In doing so, if anything ever does sprout up on my garden again unexpectedly, I have what works for me to keep me thriving. And taking action to enhance my physical and mental well being during those rough patches is where I began to recognize the intention behind this newfound attention as self love. And that's because things like watching a heartwarming movie literally made me feel better than I felt. Misery loves company. And I didn't want that to be mine on a day where I wasn't in a good place. Being outside, catching some sun and fresh air brought expansion to feelings that felt stuck behind four walls, and action taken to alleviate and not aggravate my pain. Eating wholesomely provided value for my body and its well being because I was using food to nourish it, where I was used to using food to suppress. Even something as simple as lighting a candle came with a sense of comfort because of what it signifies to me. And for me, that's rest and tranquility. And last but not least, the intention set forth by trading my regularly productive day for a chill one was the love for that part of me that was 9 years old, who had finally received the chance to grieve, who had just also happened to have had a long day and needed some rest. Self love is an essential part of my life now, but recognizing what it was and how to use it, that was very unclear for a very long time. I didn't know how it should feel. And as long as I can remember, it's been easier for me to give this out than to receive it. So when it came to understanding how to love myself, well, that felt like trying to understand quantum physics. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. And it seemed undecipherable, at least to me. It just was something so out of reach. But it was actually during a heart to heart, a brief one, with my sister in law, that I shared this difficulty I was having trying to learn how to love myself and what it meant. She listened and gave me the most nonchalant explanation ever, in a good way, of course. This concept I'd found so difficult to decipher was lovingly and effortlessly interpreted in a way that felt like the answer had been there all along, like it was mine. She was like, "You're already doing it. Loving yourself isn't something you go out and look for. It's the way you do for yourself, out of care for yourself." Now, don't quote me on the exact wording. I was driving when she said this to me, and I was completely mind blown. She went on to explain that things like working out for me was out of self love. In my case, I'd always been transparent with her about the way keeping an active lifestyle was crucial for my mental health, which is why I showed up even when I didn't want to. Just hadn't acknowledged the ways I was already actively bringing value into my life, into my mind, and into my body. And she was right. There was absolutely a great deal of love behind each action I took, I wanted to show up fully, feeling my best. So I took steps to get there. That was out of self love. I didn't want to keep suffering. I wanted to feel better. And up until that point, I thought loving myself and self love were two different things, but I don't really think that they are. I think that they go hand in hand by honoring who you are. So when I work out, I'm honoring myself by honoring my health and well being. I want to take care of this body so it keeps going strong. And when I pause my daily routine to have a gentle day, I was honoring myself by honoring my needs that day. I've even skipped out on gym time at home to just journal some pent up emotions. And in doing so, I was honoring myself by honoring my mental health. I'm just loving on myself. It's a loving way to provide your body with some goodness that helps you and not drowns you. It's nourishing and not sabotaging. Emotional release was what I found was attached to the past and experienced in the present. It was the result of not being able to feel in the moment. And I knew I didn't want to be trapped by my emotions for that long ever again. So if in the moment is presence, I'd go on to learn to be with everything that graced mine. Presence, that is. Would you believe me if I told you I didn't even conceptualize what being present was until about 3 years ago? Here are a few things Eckhart Tolle, author of The Power of Now, said that completely changed my life forever. He says, "Nothing ever happened in the past. It happened in the now," meaning that present moment in the past. Nothing will ever happen in the future. It will happen in the now. Once I became aware that both the past and future are created and lived right this moment, I began what he refers to as being. And I did feel more alive than when I lived actively in my head. By choosing to bring myself to the present, a deeper appreciation and gratitude grew for every part of my life. What I took from that book was that present is living, not in the way that is physical of breathing, but alive in the everyday. The same place we have the opportunity to experience emotions as they show up. For those of us on autopilot, it might be something that we're just zooming right past. The importance I have found in experiencing emotions in the past is equally as important as recognizing, living, and feeling through the emotions we experience every day. Where I was used to actively avoiding the majority of my emotions, it was giving the space to identify and feel these emotions that grew the space and opportunity for living more in joy and happiness. Brene Brown writes that joy deeply connects, expands our thinking and attention, and fills us with a sense of freedom, while happiness is longer lasting and the result of effort, both of which I like to think of having this new bright golden sun just for your garden. It lights up perfectly what's already grown and has yet to grow. Presence genuinely created such a deep and profound appreciation for my life. It gave me the opportunity to live out every inch of my garden, whereas I would have otherwise just kept it hidden. So in the moments in which I dug up old wounds, I was actively also digging up the past. And an onset of depressive habits always followed. Depression, a concept Eckhart Tolle regards to as living in the past. And as a person that has personally battled with it, his perspective made sense to me. I'd suffered from depression on and off since the birth of my son and wasn't formally diagnosed until after I had my daughter. And depression, by clinical definition, is absolutely more complex than just living in the past. However, When I thought about depressive spells and what could have triggered them, it was always something that had already happened, literally in the past. So I personally rolled with this take on depression because I wanted to become more aware of when my mind was going to any other time than the time and the moment that was right in front of me, especially because I used to get lost in it for extended periods of time. Books like The Body Keeps a Score have taught me that when we think about the past, our bodies can't tell the difference between time periods. It responds the way it did way back when, hence reliving the trauma part. So while I did want emotional release and freedom, it did require me to revisit the past. I would just now choose not to stay there for too long because it could keep me from this very moment and living in it. So I gained two things: that if I had a choice between reliving my past and living this moment right now, one, I was only hurting myself by thinking about a time and space that literally no longer existed. And that two, that this moment, this day, is what I could create and was very much alive. Being able to attach this take for my depression was truly a game changer. But this was also only made possible by my ability to forcefully take a glance at what it was that made me feel the need to keep reverting my brain back to that moment in the past. It obviously needed addressing for me, but it would go forward in a manner that took a good look at this painful time slash moment in my life and was followed by a choice with my full attention to disconnect it from my life today. And I mean that in the most literal sense. To realize I was now in 2025, not in any year prior, and would no longer live with me in this present moment. Bottom line, presence is the attention to the present that helped me move from the past and connect me deeply with the gift every single day creates. My journey is just that. It's mine alone. It hasn't gone in one set direction like I thought that it would, and it continues to surprise even me as well as evolve. I pick up what resonates with me and apply it to my life wherever I see fit. Journeys are all one of a kind in that way. Mine just happens to be the thing I had to rediscover so that I didn't take it for granted. And with it came an immense sense of humility for everything I lived and lived through. Emotions are holders of truth in our experiences, and having compassion for each of them is a selfless way to honor our stories. Learning to differentiate what we need from what we want can empower us to grow the consideration necessary for ourselves on our journeys, while presence connects us deeply with our souls, reminding us of everything that exists right where we are. Digging up old wounds has taught me that in my healing journey, it is a critical step to give myself the space to feel emotions as they come up. It's something that, as painful as some of these feelings may be, ultimately brought freedom. Self-love has also been crucial in tackling difficult bits on my healing journey. Emotions carry an intensity and are indistinguishable by our brain. So discovering and identifying ways to take care of yourself during very real moments of distress is an act out of love that can help us get to a better place than we were before. It's kind of like a shelter while the storm passes. It's also an action that can be used anytime you actively work to improve your quality of life, all out of self-love. And while Eckhart Tolle is all about the present moment and has been the reason I seek beauty in my everyday, I have also really had to sort some stuff out in my past to be able to move forward. There's no doubt in my mind, not everyone has to sort the past to live in what he calls the now, but understanding the perspective of visiting the past has also made me appreciate my personal journey. Learning how to bring my attention to the present has taught me that no storm is grave enough to take me back to a moment that no longer exists. So while exploring wounds has been critical to my path, remembering to anchor down in the present when my brain wants to sail back has given me the power not to stay there for too long. I like to view life as our very own gardens, meant to be nurtured, cleared, and just allowed to bloom. So as you go on to explore your life's personal oasis, as always, may you leave here only with what can help yours grow. I am so grateful to have shared the space with you. And if this episode planted something within you, you can water it with me on Instagram, where this community continues to bloom. The link for that is in the show notes. Until next time, keep honoring your growth, trusting your path, and embracing this breathtakingly and perfectly beautiful journey that is life.